for people that suffer with serious mental illness and suffer from failure and defeat, they don't realize that the bridge between serious mental illness and success is a short bridge. And then I've crossed that bridge and I want them to follow me.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Hello everyone, my name is Armando Batista, and today I am excited to have Michael Towers for today's episode so that he can share his story on what Crucible has done in his life. So Mike, if you can, go ahead and give an introduction about yourself.
Okay, Michael Towers. I am a mental health counselor. I am a professional speaker, and I've also worked in the entertainment industry, concerts, theater, conferences for 30 years.
Cool. Thanks for that. So just for the listeners, we may have some vulgar language in this episode, so just keep that in mind. If you have any kids around, you may want to have some earphones, just being real. So yeah, Mike, so tell me a little bit about yourself prior to the weekend and what brought you to the weekend.
Yeah, so prior to the weekend, I feel like things were really good. I had the best year of my life income-wise for my career. I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary to my second wife, but a wife that couldn't be more perfectly matched for me. So we were celebrating that. I felt like mentally I was just in a really healthy place, healthy as I'd ever been. Just great associations at church. You know, you were one of them. A lot of people excited for me when I signed up for Crucible. I think at that point, when I signed up, I believe probably about 7 members of my church had gone to Crucible, but by the time I was ready to go, I believe it was more like 15. And if there were anything that had happened, I lost my father about a month before then due to addiction. And, you know, for me, it was a bit of a relief because for the last 14 years, his addiction kind of put me in a place kind of his caretaker and his social worker. And there was so much pain and heartache. But with his death, that kind of burden was released from me. And, you know, I knew his pain and his addiction. He was free of it and he was with Jesus and I had peace. So I was ready to go to Crucible. I was clear. I was ready. I did the homework. We had some pre-retreat assignments and I feel like I had a lot of clarity going in.
Yeah, so I wonder, what was the reason why you decided to go? Like, was there a man that invited you? Was there something that really hit home for you? I know you shared about your dad, but is there something that really drove home that, hey, I need to get on this weekend?
You know, I don't think anybody invited me. I know that both pastors went and a couple people from church had gone. And I remember a group of people had gone in the fall, or maybe it was the spring. But before you went, there was a group of men that went, and I thought, wow, they went, and I felt like those were my peers. And one of them was my best friend. Actually, 2 of them you can consider really close friends. And I didn't get invited. And as you know, those types of things play right into what, my issues are with not being included, not feeling wanted, not being part of the crowd, and not feeling like I'm good enough. And I wasn't invited. And that sucked. And I said, screw it. That's for church guys anyway. I've seen a lot of life out there that they haven't. And I've done a lot of therapy and a lot of stuff. And whatever they're doing, it's not for me anyway. But we did our men's retreat that you were at. And Saturday, Jonathan, our pastor and my best friend, preached a sermon where he talked about his father's anger and how his father's anger affected him as a kid and how it showed up for him in life. And I remember it was pretty moving because he said, despite his father's anger, his father was a great man that led him to Christ. And he was a great, great father. And he had tears rolling down his face. But in the next sentence, he said, and then I went to Crucible. And the way he said it, if you remember that, as if it was, he said, a lifetime of being jacked up went away, like he was free from a weekend at Crucible. And a half hour after that sermon, signed up. And I didn't know what I was getting into. and none of you guys told me, but I wanted whatever it was that Jonathan experienced just based on that sentence that he shared.
Yeah, you went. It sounds like you went into the weekend not feeling invited and going to a place where you didn't know what was going on, but you knew something great was going to happen based off of another man's experience. So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about how once you signed up for the weekend and those calls that you got for the interviews and the lead up to the weekend, how was that for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I got the interview call, and like I said, I truly believe and mean it from the bottom of my heart. I felt like I was healthy as I had ever been, and I know the interviews because I've given interviews now, and how long they take, and what comes up for people. And I recorded my interview, right, and it was short, and I remember the interview guy going, "Man, you're in pretty good shape." You know, I was almost ready for him to say, "You know what, you don't need this," and I just felt like I was going, and I feel like, look, I've seen men now being a part of Crucible that come in all sorts of shape, and it takes all kinds, and you could come in the worst of shape or in the best of shape, and get life transformation from Crucible. For me, it was important for me to come in stable, calm, with clarity, but even in that shape. I went to places I didn't even know existed for me, to find things that I didn't even know were possible, to have a breakthrough that I didn't know could happen.
Yeah, that's good. So, yeah, just share a little bit about that experience. And remember, we don't want to give away the weekend, but we want to help men and women understand what they may get out of this weekend
Yeah,
based on your
I,
story.
I know that what you hear is the quote. I heard it. Jim Bergen, the pastor at Flatirons, talks about it in his testimony. He's the one that said it. It's like Fight Club. We don't talk about Fight Club. And I actually remember hearing leaders talk about, no, don't say that. Like, that's not. And I think to some degree, for me, I think you share about your experience to the level at which it's going to get the man on the weekend, right? I think that's important. Nobody told me anything. I remember specifically you at the sound console at Mosaic. Gosh, if that was Sunday, it was 5 days before I left. Well, I left on a Thursday to Colorado, 4 days before I left, and how genuinely excited you were, and the look in your eyes. I knew that something special was there. But no, nobody told me anything. Nate Wigley, another good, very close friend of mine, guy I look up to, was so excited about what was going to happen. And you guys weren't devious about it. Just no one said anything. So I had my idea of what was going to happen. And all I can tell you about that is it was nowhere near what I thought was going to happen. But, I get there, and I don't think any of what I'm experiencing is necessary. It was a whirlwind of stuff. But as I learned about why we do what we do, to get me to a place where all of it's engineered so that there's a moment in time where I'm going to face myself, and all of it gets me to that place. And I think that what I mean, if we're going into what I got that weekend,
Yeah.
I think for me, I went in again healthy, but at the same time, relationally, I never was healthy. I was bullied growing up. You could even go further. Let's say to my dad, where he was an alcoholic, and in a lot of decisions that he made, in a way, he chose alcohol over me, right? And because of that, you could say that he didn't care for me as much as he cared for alcohol. So I could have taken on, that I didn't matter, and or I wasn't loved, or as loved as much as alcohol was. And I know that when we talked about the past, or confronted some of those things over the weekend, I didn't want to go back to my dad because I was at peace with him. I didn't need to go dragging up some of that stuff because I was in a good place with my father. And I had enough to deal with the bullies as it was. And I can gladly report that I've done a lot of work with my father since. Crucible has got a tool for every nut, and can heal a lot of every wound, honestly. But what ended up happening was with me is being bullied and being told we don't want you around, you're not good enough, your clothes suck, you're poor, you're not a good athlete, and being rejected all the time. For me, what it did was I just decided to get in the gym, and I got this I'm going to prove it to you attitude, and I'm going to put on all this muscle, and I'm going to fight, win or lose. I'm going to fight, and I'm not going to put up with that anymore. And I keep this persona of I'm going to say whatever I want. I'm not going to take anybody's crap, no matter what. I work in the hospitality industry, and I'm notorious for not kissing up, taking crap, and it has shown up in my life by blowing up things relationally. And if you don't send me an email back, I've taken that personally, right? It's not that you have kids or your internet's down, right? Or you're on vacation, or maybe you're hospitalized. It's because you don't like me, or I don't matter enough to return an email. And now I've got to confront you. And so many times, maybe 89% of the time, I confront you and I'm wrong. And I just relationally pull a pin on a hand grenade so many times to blow up situations that didn't exist, because I constantly tell myself that everybody's out to get me because I project onto them that I'm not good enough.
Yeah, and how were you able to process that over the weekend where, hey, I generally think that people don't care about me, and having to deal with that whole, like, hey, I'm going to prove myself and I'm going to do whatever it takes and I'm not going to take nobody's shit. How were you able to process that, and how has that helped you develop in that area?
So I got to tell you, hearing these men's stories, I can tell you there was a lot of anger and a lot of sadness. Me and you have talked about how during a staffing, when I had an incident with a man where too many times I discount my story because so many men have had it so difficult with the stuff that they've have with what has happened to them. But because of that, I leave myself defenseless in situations, because I don't deserve a shield to fight against what comes at me, because I deserve, to take that pain, because somebody else deserves it more. And my pain is my pain. And I think for me, those bullies needed to be eliminated. They need to be blocked, taken away, removed. And Crucible has an amazing way for letting you take a look at what that looked like and how it shows up in your life today, and then to be able to go back and make a decision as to what you're going to do with all that, and then to get rid of it, right? And I got to get rid of it. And I walked out of Crucible knowing that I was good enough. And I can stand here today confidently that no other person on the planet's opinion of me will ever convince me that I'm not good enough. That if an email isn't returned, if I'm not invited to a party, if those things happen, that's about the other person. That's not about me. Maybe I'm a little bit too vulgar, or X, Y, and Z, but it doesn't have anything to do with me in a way that I'm being excluded or anything like that. So much rolls off my back now when I realize that everybody isn't out to get me, and that if people don't like me, well, it's about them. It's not about me. I'm good with Michael Towers today. And I think, for me, I left Crucible honestly thinking that I was cured. And as you know, it doesn't take long. And for me, I came home, I got a new job. And at that job, it was for a treatment center as a counselor. And my director, or the person that owned the treatment center, wasn't clinical. She was just someone from the streets that got recovered and wanted to start a treatment center to help people. So she was over my shoulder, basically micromanaging everything that I did. And, this woman's not clinical. She doesn't have the degrees. She doesn't have the experience that I have. And I went home and I told my wife, if this woman micromanages one more thing that I do, I am going to, and again, so what, right? She's my boss. So whether she does or she doesn't, you don't confront your boss, right? But with Mike Towers, he doesn't put up with that. Whether he's going to lose his job or not, he's got to. But here's the deal: I'm going to tell her what's what, right? And then it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It doesn't matter what she thinks, whether she micromanaged or not. That's not about me. It's about her. It's her company. Her micromanaging or what she thinks about how I can do my job has no bearing on how good I am at doing my job. I'm great at my job. And like that, I realized that I have the tools necessary to handle these situations every day. It's like I now can see the train wreck coming and I know how to get out of the way.
That's so good. Yeah. So I know you've mentioned that you've staffed, you've done more work. But before we go on that part, I do want to hit on one thing. So on the weekend, what was the biggest blessing you received on the weekend?
Obviously, I had a complete psychic change. I mean, I went there, always questioning whether I was good enough, didn't want to be less than. Every relationship interaction, everything that happened somehow had to do with me. And all that went away. My life changed forever. But I would say, without getting into a particular process, there's an opportunity where men from all over the country get to compliment you and say, things about you that they see in you. And there are things about me that I believe about me, like loyalty, like encourager, motivator, great friend. There's all these things that I think about me, but at the same time, I want you to believe them about me. But at times I struggle to believe them about myself, right? Because of insecurities around people telling me I'm not good enough. And when you have men from all over the country that have known you for 2 days saying all the things that you believe of yourself that they've identified in you, now you start to believe them for yourself. Other men see that in you, and it affirmed who I am. And I got an opportunity to hear that from every man that I did time with. I have never cried more tears in my life than that weekend. And I don't think as men collectively cried as many tears, yet at the same time, it takes the toughest men on the planet to go to the depths and do the work that we did that weekend.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and I remember when you were going on your weekend, you told me you were going alone and you didn't know anybody there. So I wonder how was that for you? Because I know for myself, I definitely wanted someone to go with me so I can have someone that I can do life with. But I wonder how was it going just for yourself? Because I know you were happy about that, but I'm curious, how was that for you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. You've gone on Crucible. We'll talk about these second level weekends. We've gone on those together, and you probably know that I should have gone by myself. And here's what I'll say about that. Well, first, when I got there, they hook us up with carpool people to drive up there with, and I got hooked up with a guy in the Army. He had done 14 years in the Army, and he was a contractor at that point. And as we were driving up, he had gone. He went to Flatirons, and because I did my initial weekend in Colorado, and he said, "Look, some of the guys I go to church with are staffing this weekend," and he just said, "I just want you to know that there's probably going to be maybe a bit of a military component to this, and just take it for what it's worth." And that was huge for me because I can tell you, if you had a Topps trading card, of me on the back, it's going to say problems with authority, problems with rules. If it says wet paint, I got to touch it, or hot stove. I'm a habitual line stepper. And it was great that he said that because, Crucible really does have a unique way of just from the grading process to everything from soup to nuts. And as soon as I saw it, I remembered what he said, and I just had fun and kind of laughed at everything that was going on. I act out. I want to make people laugh. It's gold to make people laugh. I could remember my sister had an aneurysm and a ruptured heart valve, and we didn't know if she was going to live. She had 8 hours of brain surgery, 14 hours of heart surgery, and in the hospital, I had at any time 30 people there to visit her. Everybody laughing at one of the hardest times. And so it's gold. If I go with another person, am I taking it serious? And I think going alone for me was really important.
So I know that you've staffed various times. You're in this 2-year program with me, and it's great. And you even helped establish the Maryland community by serving. So I wonder, by staffing, what does that give you, and why do you continue to staff as many weekends as you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I think it starts with our leadership. I mean, Chris Cleghorn was at my initial weekend, and just to be around him, I mean, I think you'll admit that just being in his presence, I grow. Peter
Yeah,
Aldrich is our leader, and again, when I staff my first staffing in Connecticut, I get a weekend with men like this. So I
yeah,
really didn't know what I was getting into. I mean, obviously, I knew what the weekend entailed, and limited roles as a newcomer, but I was in the kitchen, and I like that because for me, being active, doing that type of hard work lets me be of service, um, makes me feel useful. And when I got out to participate in some of the exercises that I went through, I can remember taking on a whole lot of emotion. Men that shared my story, whether it was a divorce, a man crying because he desperately wanted his wife back, and remembering what that felt like when I desperately wanted my ex-wife back, and I can remember just crying and having to leave because it was too much for me, and I can remember Peter, a leader, coming up to me and whispering in my ear the next time I came around to try to do the work. When I started to get emotional again, whispering in my ear and going, "This is this man's work. Help this man do his work." And I realized that I was there to hold space and to help this man, and by doing that, I was able to do that, and that helped me to answer your question. Realize that I was there, am there to hold space for these men to get the gold that I got, that I'm part of the process of changing men's lives forever. And then when you talk about the community that we have, and we get to go out and do these weekends, and it is amazing. Look, how many people have what we have?
and what is that you have?
I got men that I can be accountable with. I mean, you look at last night, we had a 2-year group last night, and there's something I wanted to share and just completely forgot about it. But you brought it up, and I was able to share some things about struggling with porn, about struggling with wanting to talk to women that aren't my wife, about having conversations with women that aren't my wife, things that I just don't know that men that are out there struggling. When you struggle with something, the first thing you got to do is admit that there's an issue, and then get it out to
Yeah.
somebody, and hopefully you can get it out to some people that can serve you, and bring it up again. And I think that's what we have together. And coming out of my initial weekend, we had the soul group, and I think that's like the first thing I believe you can do coming out of a weekend is get a soul group. And what I can tell for anybody listening to this podcast is that I grew more from a trajectory standpoint in that 14 weeks of that soul group than in any other time in my entire life.
Yeah, and that was the official grow group, right? The official curriculum part, not the journey group part. That's the group you're talking about,
The
correct?
soul group, yeah, I haven't been in yeah, we did that journey group for a little bit at
Yeah.
Mosaic,
Okay.
but no, the soul group, yeah, just 14 weeks of just yeah, so much went on during that 14 weeks.
I know you did that group, and then you've talked about the 2-year program and how we're in the 2-year program. We've now attended the mission weekend, sexuality, the leadership dark side. So, what made you step into the 2-year program, and being a year in, what has that done for you?
That's crazy. So what made me do it? So there were some things that I wanted to accomplish, and I hadn't accomplished them yet. And one of them was to be a professional speaker. That's not easy. That's not for everyone. And I've had a desire to do it since I was handed my college degree back in 2012, because I was in college for 17 years. And mental illness, I did well in high school, right? 3.5, no problem. Played football, and then I get into high school. It takes me 17 years, multiple dropouts, 1.9 GPA, and then I get sentenced to. I get charged with a crime that looking at 33 years in jail, and I get sentenced to psychiatry. 5 years in the Department of Corrections. He suspended all of it and gave me psychiatry. And once I got treated from a mental disorder, I got 2 degrees in college. And I just wanted to tell people that no matter their hurts, their mistakes or their diagnosis, they can accomplish anything and live a life beyond their wildest dreams. And I think, for people that suffer with serious mental illness and suffer from failure and defeat, they don't realize that the bridge between serious mental illness and success is a short bridge. And then I've crossed that bridge and I want them to follow me. And I hadn't yet done that. I've done some coaching. I paid $6,000 for coaching. I'm kind of fooling around on social media trying to figure out how to do it. I wrote some programs. I'd been added to the Speakers Bureau for the Society for Human Resource Management, the biggest HR organization in the world. But I was willing to throw anything against the wall and see if it stuck. Peter Aldrich was going to be our leader. Chris Clagahorn was going to be our leader. You were in it. So there was no negatives. And I get this idea to do this second level was a no-brainer. By the way, as far as second level weekends go in mission, I think that everybody in the world should go to Mission and Purpose Weekend. Everybody in the world should go through what we went through at Mission and Purpose, because it'll change everything about the way you want to do life going forward. So I do that, and I turn on my cell phone walking out of Mission and Purpose, and it comes on, and I get my first paid professional speaking gig. And I don't think, Justin Tucker hit it was a 65-yarder to beat the Detroit Lions. And when he hit that, John Harbaugh said in a press conference that day, he said, sometimes things happen in life where God is the only explanation. And to turn that phone on and to have that email, God was the only explanation. And we start 2-year group the next month. And I spoke 12 times professionally this year. 2-year group, Crucible. I can't do professional speaking if I don't feel like I'm good enough. If every rejection that comes back, and there's been rejection, that I'm not good enough. Crucible changed my life.
Yeah, that's good. If there's someone thinking about going on the weekend, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say talk to somebody that's gone. I would tell them to listen to this podcast. I haven't listened to it yet. I think I commit to listening to some of these episodes so that if somebody asks me, I can point them to an episode. I would certainly say to listen to Jim Bergen's testimony. Here is a man who is a pastor of one of the most successful and biggest churches in the country, who for years says that he never felt like he was qualified to run that church because of the same things that I struggled with, not being good enough, not being worthy, not deserving it. And I think everybody should listen to that. But what I think is, if you're thinking about going, people that have it all together don't think about going to retreats where they don't know what's going to happen, or somebody else suggested going because of X, Y, and Z. And that's probably God talking to you. Yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because that story is actually posted along with many other stories. If you go to the crucibleproject.org/stories, which we'll put in the comments below, but that story, along with other stories of other men and women that have attended the Crucible Weekend, is found on that site. So thanks for sharing that.
That's great.
So you've gone on this weekend. You've experienced what it seems like grace. You've been able to work on this whole, hey, I'm not good enough. And you've been able to take that to this world, to your family, and to a platform where you can speak, and you can speak about mental health. So where do you see yourself going from here, and where do you see yourself growing from here?
Yeah, so we were given an assignment of coming up with a leadership project after one of our second level weekends. And I think for me, I was working on it today. I want to develop a course for men that they can go through to get what we've gotten. And it's going to be a combo of things that, I learned through the processes I've done in Crucible and also through Alcoholics Anonymous, where you examine you look at the pre-retreat homework, and you kind of talk to some people about what they see and like in you and what they would change. And now you start to get an idea of, okay, well, these are some of the things that people are seeing that I should change. But when you look about it, analyzing the resentments and the anger that you have, and taking a look at how you've conducted yourself as a man in sexual situations and relationships, and looking at fear and how fear shows up in your life. Thinking about that shadow, that stuff that we hide, repress, and deny, and just stuff's about our personality that we don't want people to see. Get that stuff out in the open. So written assignments along that stuff, making amends for past wrongs, things that are just cathartic in nature that allow us to clean up our side of the street so that we don't look at our shoelaces anymore, right? And that we can look people in the eye. And along with that coursework, some coaching, and be able to help people do this. But, I'm all in on Crucible. So I do see myself for the rest of my life being very active in Crucible. Crucible has a coaching program. It looks like we're going to have an opportunity to learn how to do some of the work as leaders to facilitate some of the work. And I want to learn that. And that's a prerequisite for the coaching program, which is intensive, right? But for the money, it's amazing. And I could be a Crucible coach, and they'll start to refer people that need coaching along this type of work. And to be able to guide somebody who's blocked because of some type of, message that they've taken on in life, and help them remove that message and support the man that's sitting across from me so they can walk out of my office, right now, free of fear, to be able to accomplish the things they want to accomplish. It's a dream come true.
I want to say this. So I want to honor you for being on this episode and sharing your story, because being vulnerable it's hard. And I'm speaking to myself. It can be hard, right? But I know that oftentimes people can relate to messes. So I want to appreciate you, and I honor you for sharing and being vulnerable. But most importantly, for the growth that I've seen in you since we've started this work. From the day that you started till now, I've seen a tremendous change weekend after weekend after weekend. So I see it working in you, and I see it doing great things in your life, in your friendships, and you've been able to own a lot. So much so that I think that also helped you be so vulnerable tonight and willing to share. So I want to honor you for doing that and for speaking the truth. And you've also spoken truth to me many times. So I appreciate you for doing that. And I love this work as well. And I love doing the 2-year program with you, and it's been phenomenal. But is there anything else that you want to share before we close off this episode?
Yeah, I want to give some gold to you, and I want to share 2 stories. I would not, all that growth you see, you're my go-to with this work. You are unmovable when it comes to your lack of fear with regards to confronting me and getting in my way to do the work. And I wouldn't be where I'm at and all that growth without you. You're number one, Armando.
Thanks, bro.
And I tell you, we got some guys. There's one out there that I love. It's my bestest friend. And I don't want to lose. I want to make sure he keeps doing the work. I want to make sure he keeps staffing. And I know he's got new challenges. He's leading some things right now. And it's a bit overwhelming for him, but we need him on the team still. But there's a lot of men out there that aren't doing the work and leading like we are. And it is just great to be in the foxhole with you, man. But 2 stories. Thanksgiving football game last year. We were playing football, and I got arguing with one guy, and a Crucible Brothers brother-in-law got a little smart with the mouth and told me to shut up. And I slapped the ball out of his hand and shoved him. And it became this big argument. And the brother-in-law came over, who's a Crucible brother and a friend of mine. And I shoved him. And then Armando came over and grabbed me and started pushing me off the field. And essentially he says, what does your little boy want? And, it's always that question, right? And it's just to belong. You don't want to be told to shut up, right? If I got what I wanted in that situation, right? And so Armando encouraged me to I did not feel like I owed an apology for reacting to the shut up, but he said, is that the way you wanted to react? The answer was no, and that I could apologize for. So that's the type of work I'm talking about. But one of my favorite Crucible stories is I had an issue with my neighbor, and my neighbor not a healthy individual, young guy, and he was out the window, and he called my wife a fat bitch. My wife is the sweetest person in the world, and it was in a fit of anger over my dogs. And I tell you about my background and all that stuff, and that guy had to go. And I went out and stood in front of his house waiting for him to come outside. I was going to fight him. I had all these problems. And for 10 days, this owned me. I got poor Armando, Chris Cleghorn's in his boxers on a Zoom call. Peter, we had this meeting about how I'm going to kill the neighbor. And it was hilarious watching Chris, poor Chris, man, try to talk me off this ledge. But finally, I was like, you know what? Everybody's soft, man. Everybody, I need to call Byron up. Because if somebody would have told Byron's wife, she was a fat bee, what would Byron do? Byron would get the six shooters out. So I called Byron up, and Byron's first question to me was, Michael, what's your little boy want? And I was like, God, come on, Byron. The guy said to me in the argument, he looked over and said, your neighbor put up that fence over there because nobody wants you in this neighborhood. And I want to be wanted in the neighborhood. And that's what my little boy wants, to be wanted. And these things are going to come up. But we have the tools to deal with them. And we say in Crucible, the journey continues.
Yeah, it sure does. And it sounds like the journey is continuing for you when it comes to being wanted. And I wonder, do you feel wanted, and are you able to step into that in this work?
Yeah, absolutely. It's wild. Jonathan took over Mosaic, and since he took over Mosaic, I haven't hung out with him once. As a matter of fact, I think the only time I've seen him is on stage or on YouTube. There is a time where I would have taken that personally. What I know now is that he's somewhere doing something important, and it has nothing to do with me. And we'll have our time, but right now Jonathan's making it happen, and we're gonna hang out and watch the Steelers play at Ravens Stadium on New Year's Day, and that is the type of I feel wanted in a situation where in the past I wouldn't have felt wanted at all.
Yeah, so that's great, and it sounds like you're working on that, and you're a lot more healthy in that side of the house. So I honor you for that, and I want to thank you again for being on this episode tonight and sharing your story and just being real, being vulnerable, and sharing how you've been able to build a community through this work and work on you. Most importantly is working on yourself, right? Mm-hmm. That's the most important thing about Crucible, in my opinion, is the ability to work on yourself mm-hmm. while also supporting others and working to help support others.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Also, don't forget to check out myjourney2.com for your free 2-week trial. That's myjourneyto.com. Thank you for listening.